G'day everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of season 2 of SteelTalk by SteelCorp. We're pretty pumped to be bringing you this episode along with Shane, my brother-in-law, and Eli Gescheit from Navon Planning. It's exciting to be interviewing industry experts and specialists in this season, and I can't wait to be sharing with you some exciting tips and advice from Eli. So looking forward to our session. Thanks for giving up half an hour of your afternoon. SteelCorp's a family-owned company based out of two locations, one in northeast Victoria, Wangaratta, and the other in Western Sydney. My name is Josh, and I'm General Manager at SteelCorp, and I'm here today with Shane. G'day, Shane.
How you going, Josh?
Yeah,
I'm the development manager here at SteelCorp.
Great to have you with us. And Shane's been with the company for probably almost 10 years and has a good technical grasp of structures, and looking forward to sharing some advice on this session as well. Just for those of you who may have missed our episode last month, we had a chat with Julian Navarra, a skilled structural engineer. So if you have had an opportunity to watch that episode, I think Shane's going to drop the link into the chat if you can at some stage, Shane, to the YouTube link there. Some great advice around what role the structural engineer plays in a project. And as always, we like giving away things. So we're giving away a bit of education today and advice, but also excited to be giving away a couple of merch packs as well for some lucky attendees. Last month we gave away some due to some great questions being asked during the session. So if you have got a question for Ellie, be sure to put it in the Q&A box, and we'll answer those at the end. A pack of branded lager or ale and a We Get Shed Done shirt could be on its way to you. So massive thanks, Ellie, for joining us on this session. I guess I'll throw over to you now and open the floor up for a bit of a intro into you and what you specialise in.
Thanks, Josh and Shane, for the opportunity to talk to you guys here this afternoon. Just to give you a bit of a background as to my experience and what I'm doing at the moment. So first off, and most important, I'm a father of 3 kids, and I've been married for about 16 years or so. And I've actually been a planner for probably almost 15 years. And having experience in both working in councils as well as private practice. I've worked in Waverley Council as well as Hurstville Council as assessing DAs and giving planning advice to customers. And for the last 7 years or so, I've been running Navon Planning. In terms of other consultancies I've worked at the big, probably the biggest firm in Australia, Urbis, as well as another smaller planning firm called Newstein Urban. So I guess I've had the experience the best of the both worlds. Sorry. So I understand what goes on in councils as much as I can, as well as obviously what the client's requirements for the DAs are. And in terms of Navon Planning, we primarily specialise in small to medium sized residential projects, going from carports to apartments and everything in between. In terms of commercial, we specialise in childcare centres. And naturally, our projects are across most Sydney Metro councils, and we also get involved with here and there in projects in regional New South Wales.
It's exciting to have you with us, Ellie, and I like the idea that you've been on both sides of the fence. We deal with a lot of investors and property developers, and to be honest, a lot of them hate the planning process, the approval process, because it takes time. There's a lot of jargon. There's frustration, and I'm sure you understand that how some of our clients might feel, and even how we feel as well sometimes, a bit helpless. So it's going to be great to get some advice around the process and any tips you've got for us in this catch up.
Thank you. I must admit, before I started as a town planner, I had a full head of hair.
It's just fallen down, is it?
Yeah, it has. Gravity's taken its toll.
There you go. Okay, Shane, over to you. Do you want to run through a couple of these headline slides here, and we'll throw around to Ella to thrash them out a bit?
Yeah, so the different levels of approval. Yeah, can you explain the different levels of approval, Ellie?
Yeah, sure. A lot of people don't know these three levels of approvals. So there's three main categories in New South Wales and the New South Wales planning system. The first is exempt development. The second tier is compliant development, which is probably more commonly known than exempt. And naturally, the third one is development application, or DAs, which most people are familiar with, and that is with dealing with councils. So just to summarize all three categories, the first one, exempt development, that's where you can build things like sheds or pergolas or decks in a small type of structures without any council approval. There is quite a lengthy ticker box exercise you have to go through, but basically if your small project, a lot of it also is cosmetic work too. If it ticks the box, then it's exempt development. You don't need any approval. You can basically just do it. I would, though, however, recommend you might want to speak to your neighbours before you do any work like that. The next tier is compliant development, which is similar to exempt development, but you can obviously do a lot more. You can do now dual occupancies under a compliant development. Mind you, compliant development, you can actually bypass council and you can get your project approved through a certifier. It's a much quicker process. It's kind of all in one process. You have to submit all of your documents, and if it all ticks the box, then it goes to the certifier and it gives you an approval. Compliant development also includes new houses, renovations to houses, as well as you can build, I believe, up to a 10,000 square metre warehouse, also under compliant development. So it's quite a broad area that it covers. And then the third tier, which is probably the most commonly known type of approval, is a DA, a development application. And for most people that know, it involves lodging your plans with council, and it includes also notifying the neighbours, and the council has to get their feedback on board. I should preface also, with compliant development, the neighbours are notified, but they don't actually get a say in if they like what you've got approved or not. Whereas a DA, the neighbours do have an influence in the system. And generally speaking, DAs can take between 3 months to 6 months, or even up to a year, depending on the scale of the project and its complexity.
A couple of questions here, if I may, Ellie. Compliant development simply means what I'm proposing to build fits within the rules. There's no real need to test it so much, at the council level. In your experience, is there many developments that could have gone through a compliant development stage that have been pushed straight to a DA? Is that a mistake that can be made?
Yeah, I definitely encourage clients who come to me, if they're doing a small renovation or something, I might say, well, try and do it as a compliant development if you can. Certainly, if you can try avoid a DA, but at the same time, Josh, you might end up in a situation where, even though a compliant development is a much quicker approval, you might not be able to build as much compared to lodging a DA. The other, I guess, benefit with a DA, though, is there is an ability to try and apply for more than what's permitted. For example, you might want to go a little bit higher than what's allowed, obviously within reason. But if you're just going with a complying development, even if you're 1 centimetre above the height limit, you can't do it. So it has to fit in 100%.
And before we move on from this slide, you said the DA could take 3, 6, 12, 18 months in a worst case scenario, I guess. But from a compliant development, you said it's a quicker process. Is that something that can be done in a month or 6 weeks or so? What's that look like?
Yeah, generally, obviously you'd have to package the application. You need obviously your plans, your engineer, your stormwater engineer, all of these aspects have to come in at the same time. So that might take a couple of months, maybe 1, 2 months, depending how quickly you're doing it. And then I would say once you lodge it with the certifier, it could be approved within a number of weeks. But from my understanding is generally there's often some fine tuning after you submit your plans to the certifier. You might need to shave something off here or there, but generally it's a much quicker process. It's not always straightforward, mind you. I've I know people who've had to do a DA because they're in a bushfire flame zone, so they couldn't do a CDC. And the alternative to lodge a DA is that they were actually left with less floor space than what they could have achieved with a DA.
Shane, we have a lot of viewers, I guess, probably from Victoria as well as New South Wales on the call. Can you just give some input as to how this sort of ties in with the Victorian system? But it is different, but there is some correlation.
Yeah, so in Victoria, a DA is known as a planning permit, and a construction certificate is known as a building permit in Victoria. And a CDC would be like getting a Fix Smart application, which is a 10-day planning permit, and then getting a building permit. Does that sound right to you, Ellie? Do you know much about Victoria?
Unfortunately, I don't know too much about Victoria, but what I do know is it's a lot simpler than over here in New South Wales.
Yeah, I'm still getting my head around New South Wales. It's all new to me.
Okay.
Good. Okay, the next slide. I saw this pop up in your LinkedIn feed recently, Ellie.
Yep.
And I know you're very active on that platform, which is great. But the words are, or it's trying to define, I guess, urban planner, which is the role you play. And it's defined as the person who is going to solve the problems you didn't know existed. Can you just go in a bit of depth around what this means? Or I found it quite amusing, actually.
Yeah, thank you. I found it funny too. Someone else posted it and I reshared it with my LinkedIn contacts. So an urban planner is not, you're not stuck in a silo. You're not just dealing with council's planning controls. You actually have to know a lot more than that. You have to know about the site and the surroundings, and you have to know about engineering, stormwater, landscaping, and trees. You've got to be a jack of all trades to be able to tie it all in together. So you have to understand how everything fits together to be able to lodge a DA, for example, or to give property and planning advice to people that are trying to build something on their site. This slide actually reminds me, when I used to work at a particular council in Sydney, I was often giving advice to customers. You know, they want to do a car space or they want to build a new home. And often I would, be telling them, it's not so straightforward. Often I'd say no. And I'd come back home and, tell my wife the stories that I used to, tell people, and the advice I used to tell people. And she often would call me a dream crusher. Because, these mums and dads, I even actually made somebody cry once because I told her she couldn't do what she wanted to do. So that's why sometimes, you are an urban planner, often can be perceived as bringing up all these other problems, but you can't go onto a site and do a development without acknowledging that there are going to be some problems. But even though there are problems as a town planner, we try to make sure there's solutions around those problems to make sure that not only the council is happy, but also the clients are happy too with what's going to be built.
That's it. You mentioned the word dream crusher. So I guess now what you're the role you play is a bit of a dream enabler. So if someone comes to you with a investment idea or a development plan, you're on their side now to try and make their dreams come to reality.
Yeah, I would say so. And I guess an urban planner can also be called a code cracker. We try to crack the codes of councils and try and interpret them and, allow clients to maximize what they can do on their property. So I like that. Dream enabler sounds good to me too.
Shane, in your experience, sorry, go on, Shane.
I was just going to say, you pull the right strings.
That's good.
Yeah, you pull the right strings, but the legal strings, you do it in the most transparent way.
In your experience, Shane, you've had a lot of experience with dealing with the end client. What's their feedback regarding the process if they're trying to do it themselves, without engaging an urban planner? That is.
They always have bad things to say about council and how it takes a long time and all that sort of thing. Yeah,
that's good. I can certainly relate to that, I reckon. Over to you, Shane.
So what are the benefits of partnering with a professional? Can you speak to that, Ellie?
Yeah, so this slide, I guess, summarizes 4 main things that I thought that an urban planner can bring value to a project. So the first one is we speak the same language as councils. So, for example, I'll give you a lot of project home companies. They're very good at building homes, but they're not really good at dealing with councils. That's mainly because a lot of them actually use like a customer service person that's dealing with council, so they don't speak the same language. Whereas an urban planner, having worked in councils too, I kind of understand it in a way what their expectations are from me also, as on behalf of the applicant and lodging the DA, and vice versa. The other point is thorough understanding of all elements involved. That's what I was alluding to before, that an urban planner kind of has to understand exactly what's happening on the property. The plans have to show all the details as much as possible, and why, should we have an easement on the property or not? So you have to understand it, pretty much everything as much as possible. I'm not an expert in every single field to do with property, but you have to have a reasonable grasp as to how it all fits in. And that's where an urban planner such as myself, adds value to the project. Remain calm under pressure. Yeah, as I said, I did have a full head of hair before I started as a town planner. But any of my clients, if you would ask any of my clients, they'll tell you that I have a very calm nature. I don't get angry, upset. And it's very easy just to be able to just let it go with councils, because as you were saying before, Shane, a lot of clients and so a lot of people, get frustrated about the process, but I kind of have to bite my tongue sometimes and accept what the council officer is saying, so that we can find a reasonable middle ground for the project and for the client. So it kind of comes back to the first point, that you have to be able to speak the same language as the council officers. The fourth point here is quite important, because it's a bit pointless for a client to engage you, a town planner, without you being able to take it the whole way. It might be a project that has to end up in court. As a town planner, I've been involved with many court cases, the Land Environment Court. So if you can bring to the table an experience of going to court as a last resort, then at least you're able to try resolve things so that a project doesn't have to go to court, and so that the clients don't have to find another consultant that'll take the project to court, for example. So, and I also treat a lot of projects, particularly projects that are breaching planning controls, as if it's a court case. We have to provide pretty much the same level of documentation.
Talking off air earlier about your DA success rate, because it's always something that's important. And I think we had a chat around, you can probably go a bit further on it, but you've had a pretty good win rate, but you've got to be able to act on your client's side, I guess, and go as far as you can with it, don't you? Yeah, sure.
I don't have a 100% success rate. Otherwise, I'd be lying to you, be lying to my clients too. So, last year I got over 50 approvals. I don't remember the exact number, but I got around 6 refusals. That's kind of the nature of the game, that there are projects which are contentious. In most cases, I know it's going to get refused, but in some cases they just throw it at you, and it is a bit of a surprise.
No, it's interesting. It's always good to be at least pushing the boundary a bit on the cases that you're on, to make sure you get the best result for your client as well. Good. The next slide we've got here is, we don't want to go too deep on this because I'm conscious of time, but Eli, this is a bit of an overview of the process that you would run through typically on a DA process. Shane, do you want to introduce this slide and run through it?
Yeah, so what does the approval process look like? Do you want to run us through the process, Eli?
Yeah, so this is a flow chart that I generally give to clients. You guys actually adapted it and you made it look a lot nicer than my version. But generally, the way I do it for councils, for clients, so it's the same process for every single project, no matter what it is, in which council it's in. Over here, you've got 3 kind of stages. The one is a pre-DA meeting, which applies to probably a few projects. It's probably for the more complicated projects that we need to have a sit down with council before we actually lodge the DA. The next column is where you're actually preparing the DA, which takes up a lot of time too and has to be done carefully. And then the third stage, which is often the hardest stage, is once you've lodged the DA, then you have to wait for council to assess the application and going back and forth with council until hopefully you end up with an approval. But for most projects, you don't need to have a pre-DA, so you kind of cut those first 4 stages out and you go straight to preparing the DA together with your consultants. And I must say, preparing a DA very quickly is a bit dangerous because you're going to be missing some things and it'll bite you in the bum later on after you lodge the DA. So it's really important to get the level of documentation correct. And if there's I guess a non-compliance in the project, just admit it, don't hide it, because council's going to find it. And yeah, so this is a really helpful flow chart that I use, not just for myself, but also for clients.
What I love about this is the first point. I hope you're not skipping that if they don't need the pre-A, which is the on-site meeting with client. I love seeing your drone photos come from the social feeds of you getting around the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and I'm sure that your clients find a great personal connection at that stage as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you have to visit a site for every project. Google Earth and Google Maps, all that stuff doesn't really do it justice. You've got to be able to feel and breathe where you're working, as well as I often do a drive-by, take photos, see what else is going on to compare.
Excellent. Right, the next slide is over to you, Shane. You can run us through the intro to this one.
Yeah, righto. How do you help with property development and advice, Ellie?
So, listen, the bread and butter of what I do is naturally DAs and councils, but also quite a big chunk of my work is helping clients work out what they can do with their property. So it might be a property that they own already and they want to do a renovation or build a new house or a dual occupancy, or it might be a client, an investor or a developer looking to purchase a big block of land, maybe out, Western Sydney somewhere, and I give them advice on, I guess, the key planning controls that they need to think about on the property, kind of the guideline for what they can do exactly on the property, as well as I go through a lot more detail than just spitting out the basics planning controls for them. I look at what are the constraints on the property. There might be a tree in the middle that you can't get rid of, so you've got to highlight that to the client. Might be heritage listed. As well as what we do is we canvass the area to see what else has been approved. And that's quite easy to do. For those listening, there's a free and very easy website that I use almost every day. It's called Planning Alerts, where you punch an address and it tells you all the approvals within, I think, 2 kilometers of that site. So that's very important to understand exactly what's been approved in the area, so that I guess there might be a precedent that you want to try follow, or someone might have got a refusal down the road for exactly the same thing as what you want to do. So it's really important to understand what's been approved.
Or vice versa, if they may have got approval and you might end up with 3 pizza shops in the same stretch, which is probably not the best economical result.
Yeah, definitely. If you've got a shop or a business, sure. If there's a competitor opening up down the road from you, then yeah, it can be a real threat to your business. And then the last point, I like to put my counsel hat on when clients come to me proposing to do something on a site, or even if I'm lodging a DA on behalf of a client, also have to put my counsel hat on and try and think, what are the issues that council is going to that they're going to pick up on this particular site or this project, and we try to kind of address those potential issues up front with strategies and solutions to try it, get an approval for the clients.
That's excellent, Elliot. I back to that point at the start. You've been on both sides of the fence, so you can see how the views from both the council and I guess being on the other side of the fence as well. We've got some great questions rolling in. Thanks to Ben and Mark. We'll answer these shortly. Get them coming through, team. I just wanted to, I guess, spice it up a bit if we can, Elliot, before we jump into the questions and the merch giveaway. Do you have any interesting experiences or stories you can tell us in a couple of minutes that are probably scary or interesting?
Sure. I think I've been involved with probably close to 500 projects in the last 7 years since running my business, Nevon Planning. So every project, I guess, is a little story. But I guess one quick one that comes to mind about an unauthorized building work. Sorry, where it's probably one of my most complicated projects. It was a very small project, but one of the most complicated, where a client came to me. I'm not going to say which council it is, but one particular council in Sydney. This council approved a CDC compliant development on their semi for a first floor addition. So it was a very small application, except the neighbour got wind of it and got barristers involved, and actually it was determined that it was actually an invalid approval. So the council had made a mistake, and actually quite a big mistake. Meanwhile, the client had built about 80% of this renovation, even though it was invalid. So after the builder gave up on the project, they got a new builder. After they got a new engineer, after they got a new, my client had to get a solicitor and a barrister. There were kind of three parties. There was the council, my client, and the neighbour. So three lots of lawyers' fees and consultants' fees. So it got very messy in the end. And in the end, I stuck around with the project. I thought this was a real problem. So I went in there, and we were able to resolve things quite easily with council, and it wasn't as painful to the client as they thought it would be. They did have to chop some bits and pieces off their first floor addition. But at the end of the day, sorry, at the end of the day, we got an approval, and we were working with different departments within council because of the complexity of it, because it's already been built. It had an invalid approval, and we had to lodge a DA in to get retrospective approval and to cut some bits and pieces off that what had been built already. So that was very interesting. You learn a lot from these projects, and every project is a lesson. But this is just one experience that comes to mind that was quite interesting.
Just on that one, the end user or the client did nothing wrong exactly. Their project was, awarded as a CD compliant development, but it shouldn't have been. Who would have funded the costs for that to remediate?
I think it's still going. At one point, the council had offered to give 50 grand to my client, but they were going to be up for a lot more than that, because the builder who did the job didn't do things properly, according to the second engineer that looks at the project. So there was a lot of holes and problems with what had happened. So it was real cost, and obviously legal fees. It was a real shame. And as I said, this wasn't a 10-story building in the city. This was just a first floor addition in South Sydney. And often I find, these smaller projects, they're not just more they can be more complicated. They also are rewarding, especially if it's a mum and dad, who are on a shoestring budget and just trying to build their dream home.
Yeah, 100%. That's good. Thanks, Eli. So we have got a couple of questions come through on the chat. Be sure to, if you've got anything else that you want some expert advice on, now's your opportunity to pick the brains of one of Sydney's most talented urban planners. But I've got a question here from Mark, and this is probably hard to answer simply, Eli, but Mark's asking, in your experience, what are the most common kind of reasons for why a DA lodgement is refused?
Lack of information. So I can't say that something will get refused because it doesn't comply. The most common mistake I see is people not submitting the correct documentation. So, for example, they might provide a survey that doesn't show all the levels of the adjoining properties, whereas it should, or stormwater, engineering, landscape, all these things that can go wrong. I would say the most common thing that why councils refuse things is because the level of documentation is substandard.
Would that trigger a refusal or just a request for more information?
Well, often, good question. Often it does trigger that first letter that you usually get from council with all the list of questions. But even after you do that, if council's still not if council still can't read the plans correctly or there's something wrong, they can't make a proper decision. So I've seen many times where councils just refuse something because they're missing that important information.
I guess councils can't be spending all their time going back and forward asking for more information. So it's on us to get the first submission as complete as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
A question here from Ben, and that's going to come to you, Ellie. What is the rough cost to engage an urban planner? That's the magic question.
Okay, I can tell you it's not as much. It's not as expensive as an architect. Number one, architects probably charge the most compared to all other consultants you need on your team. But I would say this: if you don't pay your town planner enough, you're going to be paying for it later on. Either the DA is refused, or either you build something and something was wrong, it wasn't picked up on during the DA process. So yeah, it's a good question.
I'm going to give Ben a tip here. I reckon, Ben, my gut feel is between $5,000 and $10,000 for a good size development. So Ellie, feel free to quash that if I'm off the point.
Yeah, that's probably about right. Yeah, for a regular DA, that's probably right. You know, if it's a high-rise building, it might be 10, 20 grand, where you go with the big firms in town. But you don't need the big firms in town for most of the projects people get involved with. You can go to the Neville Planning, you can go to other planners in Sydney, but primarily that's a good about 5-10 grand. But as I said, you have to. It's better to invest in not just your planner, but a good architect and a good landscape. It's better to invest up front, otherwise you're going to be paying for it later. And to get a good builder too, you know, you've got to do your due diligence.
Good. Another question's come through. We're actually just over time, so we'll just probably do one more. There's a couple more which we'll answer offline. Shane, can you take note of those as well? If I was considering to purchase a property, which many investors are doing, they're looking to expand their portfolio or invest. What would be the cost to do a desktop review and provide some generic advice before anything's even submitted? Is that something you get involved in, Ellie?
Yeah, I do. I get involved with that regularly, pretty much on a daily basis. So it really depends on a desktop review, how much you want to get out of it. Could be just I often charge my hourly rates to like clients. It's about $250 an hour. A high level review might take me an hour or two on a particular site, for example. But if you want me to review plans and things like that, or you want to know how many units you can achieve on a particular site, it's going to take longer than an hour or two. But generally, I like to give pretty succinct advice to clients.
And it's super, and it makes logical sense, doesn't it? If you are looking to invest in a multi-million-dollar parcel of land, a few $1,000s to get some advice is going to could save you a lot in the long run. We are over time, and I'm sorry if anyone needs to jump off, but there is a lot of questions coming through, so it's pretty hot topics we're going over here, Ellie. Regarding industrial developments, I'm not sure if this is something you can answer for us, Ellie, but what is a good percentage of development for the property before it becomes unviable? I
don't know that answer, sorry.
So I guess the question is, with any property, and I guess it's good to look at the ROI on the parcel of land, is what percentage of the land are we trying to develop, I guess? Or is there a ballpark where it becomes sort of don't look at this site anymore, or find another site?
Every site's different, you know. If you're looking at Sydney Metro sites, obviously the value's a lot more. If you're looking at regional New South Wales, which I do fairly often, you know, the block of land might be $1 million and you could build, you know, who knows how many units, not units, like houses or townhouses over there. It really depends. I have clients that are, obviously it's a numbers game if the project's going to stack up or not. For me, it's important that it does stack up for them, but you also have to give them backup plans. It might be a project involving 5 townhouses and they need that 5th townhouse to make it work. And if they can't get that 5th townhouse, then that, you know, if they apply for 5 townhouses, it might get refused because it doesn't comply with a whole bunch of things. So there's no real magic number, I don't think, to answer that question, it's kind of a site-by-site scenario, as well as what type of project you're involved with. If it's a childcare centre project too, it's very, very different.
That's helpful. So there's no real golden or magic answer, I guess, but I'm sure for our clients out there, if they do find someone like Eli, they can help guide you through the process before you do invest in some land. We better start wrapping up, but I think there's one more question here which is helpful or going to be useful from a SteelTalk point of view. Shane, so I will direct one to you. If I engage SteelTalk, this is from Steve, if I engage SteelTalk, can they handle the whole urban developer process or the whole town planning process, so it is hassle-free for me?
Yes, we would engage Eli and get him to help out with the process. That's how it would normally work out. We can handle it from our point of view. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, there's circumstances where it makes more sense for some of our clients to work directly with their own urban planner if they have got a relationship with them, particularly in regional areas or other cities. But yeah, we can certainly provide advice. Not saying we've got much at all, but we'd be putting you in touch directly with someone like Eli to handle the process as a third party. So always here to help. That there is a couple more questions, so we will answer them offline. I can see your question there, Julie, and your question there, Peter. So we'll come to those offline, but we've got to keep moving to wrap it up. I got in trouble last time. So we need to announce some merchandise winners. Shane, have you come up with any names yet out of the attendee list that you would or a name you'd like to get a 6-pack of beer and a shirt off to?
I see Mark Hales there. He asked a pretty good question. I'll probably send one to him.
Thanks, Mark. So Mark's taken home a 6-pack of brand of SteelTalk beer and a shirt. Shane will reach out to you, Mark, to just make sure we get the right size for you. And I was also thinking of to reward Simon Whalen with a pack, Shane. Simon's hasn't said anything on this webinar, but he's been here, I think, all the way along. So all the way last year and in these episodes as well. So Simon Whalen will get a pack out to you as well. So Shane will be reaching out to you, if not this afternoon, tomorrow, to get your address.
Well done.
And finally, before we do close off episode 2, we will be back next month. We're committed to these things. So episode 3 is going to go live 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, May the 5th. That's in about a month's time. And the link to register is shown there on the screen, the Lumar link /SteelTalk. So that's a wrap from us for today. Massive thanks for giving up close to 40 minutes of your time. Hope it's been valuable. Eli, have you got any parting words before we close off today's session?
I would say, yeah, a planner is not a dream crasher. It's a dream enabler. I like that.
Good tagline. Shane, you got anything to close off with?
No, not really. Yeah, thanks very much, Eli. It was good. I learned a few things.
Excellent.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thanks, everyone. Well, I look forward to seeing you for our next episode. Until then, keep safe. And for those in the Sydney area, don't float away just yet. We need you around. Thanks, everyone.
See you later.